Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the No True Scotsman Fallacy. This is a fallacy basically of gatekeeping. The name derives from the idea that no true Scotsman would ever wear anything under his kilt. And it's a way of setting often fairly arbitrary standards to determine what does and doesn't, or who does and doesn't belong in a particular group. Typically, we see this with people, and this is not necessarily a good thing, but typically it is about protecting group identity, often by trying to exclude people who are in some way problematic. Being a Scotsman is not contingent on whether you wear anything under your kilt or not. That's simply not actually a relevant criterion. Many Scottish men don't wear kilts at all, especially these days. So this is the basic problem with the fallacy, right? Is it identifies something that may be characteristic, and it takes that to be essential. And then it excludes those who actually belong to a group on the basis of not meeting that particular arbitrary criterion. So I'll give you some real examples of this, because we actually see this all the time. One of the most prominent right now in the US, and often, ironically enough, one that's quite laughable, is the idea of rhinos, or Republicans in name only. And this is a term that Republicans, especially very far-right Republicans, I guess far-right, this side for me is right, the right side of your screen is that side, but often very far-right, extremist type of Republicans will label their more moderate colleagues rhinos. And this is a way of denying the legitimacy of those people's political positions, views, actions, whatever it is. Oh, it doesn't count because you're a Republican in name only. You're not a real Republican. And this does get quite laughable when you have people like Dick Cheney being accused of being rhinos because he doesn't support Trump in the 2024 election. Dick Cheney is ridiculously Republican. Like, it's hard to overstate how Republican Dick Cheney is. And then to have Republicans asserting that he's a Republican in name only, that he's somehow secretly a Democrat or a socialist or whatever it is, it's ridiculously nonsensical. And that's actually a really good example of how the No True Scotsman fallacy can be used incredibly fallaciously. And in this sense, I mean not just that the argument is not sound, but that the conclusion is not sound. So that's a very common one. We also see this with religious extremists, for instance. And this actually happens both directions. You get more sort of moderate religious people who say, oh, those extremists, they aren't real Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, whatever it is. And then you get the extremists who say, oh, those moderates, they aren't real Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, whatever. And the arguments sort of work basically in the same way, just opposite directions. So, oh, those extremists who advocate violence and intolerance and religious bigotry, they aren't real Christians, let's say, because Christians are the largest conglomerate religious group in the US, my country. So those extremists, they aren't real Christians because they don't enact Jesus's message to love your neighbor and to be kind and accept everyone, whatever it is. On the other hand, you got the religious extremists who make the argument that the more moderate practitioners of the religion are not real Christians because they tolerate all of these things that are condemned in the Bible or whatever it is. It's a gatekeeping fallacy. It assumes that one particular definition of a thing, often based not on the essential characteristic of the thing, belief in whatever the core tenet of the religion is. In Christianity, for instance, the belief in the death and resurrection of Jesus. As long as you believe in that, you are in principle a Christian. Everything else is details. If you're a member of the Republican Party, you're a Republican. Doesn't matter if you support Trump, doesn't matter if you oppose Trump, doesn't matter if you have a picture of Ronald Reagan in your bedroom, doesn't matter if nothing else matters about it. Like, that is the essential element. And so what this is meant to do is, again, to gatekeep in order to exclude those people that you don't think represent your group well. And it's not reliable because it is an arbitrary gatekeeping method. And so this is why it's a logical fallacy. This is why it's unreliable as a method of argument, is unless it identifies the essential component of being part of that group, then it fundamentally does not succeed in identifying who is and isn't a member of the group.